The day stretched lazily across the island, with a veil of disquiet hung over the land. In the locker room, Dick was surrounded by harsh fluorescent tubes. The shadows they cast flickered, creating odd shapes that darted across the walls. His teammate, Lucas, glanced over and saw a dark shape coalescing near the far end of the room. Lucas's face paled, his discomfort adding an extra edge to the room. Nearby, Officer Daniels of patrol noticed streetlights flickering, their shadows twisting unnaturally. Alara and Junie, in the college corridors, felt a chill in the air. The shadows cast by overhead lights seemed to undulate and creep in ways that made Alara's skin prickle. Juniper barely noticed, but Alara felt an unsettling sensation as if the shadows were reaching for them. A janitor saw dark shapes moving in the same corridors, casting shadows that followed him as he worked. At the movie theater, Ethan settled in, the dimness providing a refuge from the outside. Shadows on the walls shifted, and uncannily moving in time with the film as though they had a life of their own. An usher fled in panic, while a concession worker, eyes wide with fright, stumbled back from a counter, unable to shake the feeling of an unseen presence nearby. Councilman Thomason, in his office, saw dark shapes flickering on his walls. In Bergamot's walk-in freezer, Riley shared a moment with her boss as they kissed. A chill swept over them, far colder than the freezer's icy grip. Contact with a shadow caused them to flee. In the library, Reg saw shadows pulsing in every corner. A student approached him, mentioning that a book flew off the shelf on its own. When Reg investigated, he discovered that the book was about the town's history and laid open to a page detailing Kieran O'Dovda. As afternoon descended, the group gathered at the diner's counter. Alara was busy behind it, while Juniper, Reg, Dick and Riley settled in, eager to discuss their experiences. So, did anyone else notice the strange shadows today? Alara asked, wiping down the counter. Reg leaned forward, eyes wide. The library was bizarre, shadows seemed alive. A book about the town's history fell to the ground, lay open to a page detailing Kieran O'Dovda. Riley nodded. The locker room was nuts. Shadows stretching and writhing, even Lucas saw. Ethan spoke up. The theater, the shadows on the walls synced with the movie. The staff freaked out. An usher ran out of the building in terror. Julie remarked, "Seems it's not just us. Others are speaking of similar things. Something odd's going on." The conversation turned to the growing unease around town. Zeb's latest outburst added to the sense of creeping dread, and the term Shadowman fever began to make the rounds.
Tension in the diner was palpable. Tom visibly shaken made a decisive call. I'm comping everyone's meal. We're closing early tonight. I'll clean up, he said firmly. Alara, who had been working behind the counter, quickly wrapped up her shift and joined her friends. The other patrons, equally unsettled, murmured among themselves before Tom ushered them out with their to-go containers. Outside, the group huddled together to decide their next move. Junie, still unnerved, suggested instead of splitting up, let's stay at my place again. It's better to be together after what happened. Ethan nodded in agreement. I'd appreciate the company. Reg, trying to lift the mood, proposed, how about we rent Halloween 1, 2, 3, and 4? We can face our fears with some classic horror. Ethan frowned. Those movies are too gory for me. Junie offered a compromise. You don't have to watch, you can play PC games on my computer. Alara raised an eyebrow, surprised. I'm surprised you want to include Halloween 3. You always complain that it's not a Michael Myers movie. Reg shrugged with a grin. What can I say? I'm a completist. Judy teased, if it weren't called Halloween, you'd probably love it. Reg laughed. But it is called Halloween, and I don't still want to watch it. Lara nodded enthusiastically. Me too. Dick, who had been silent, suddenly erupted. What do you mean? I'm stuck decorating the mansion by myself. Thanks a lot, dear. His sarcasm was heavy. Lara tried to respond. I didn't mean no. Dick cut her off, anger simmering. You all enjoy yourselves, I'm out of here. He stormed off, frustration evident in his stride. Riley, looking frazzled, chimed in. Shit, I have to open Burger Barn early tomorrow. I can't stay. Judy, with a hint of sarcasm, replied, are you sure, bummer? Riley didn't catch the sarcasm. Yes, sorry, she turned to Dick. Dickie, you're my ride. Mind taking me home? Dick grunted, yeah sure, and Riley followed him, relieved to have a ride. As the remaining friends made their way to Juniper's place, Tom locked up the diner, ensuring everyone had left. The unsettling atmosphere of the day lingered, a stark contrast to the typical calm of their island life. They couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss, and the shadows seemed to hold secrets yet to be uncovered. The promise of spending the night together offered some comfort, but the true nature of their fears remained just out of reach.
After a brief stop at Harborside Video, the group arrived at Juniper's apartment. The air still heavy from the unsettling day. The apartment, nestled on a quieter street, was a cozy retreat against the encroaching night. Reg immediately set up Halloween on the TV while Junie bustled in the kitchen, popping popcorn and preparing snacks. Lara mixed up a batch of cocktails, ensuring Ethan's was a virgin one to suit his preference. Ethan, opting out of the slasher movie marathon, settled in front of Juniper's computer and started up Might and Magic 2: Gates to Another World. As the first film, Halloween 1970, flickered to life, conversation flowed freely. Rich, ever the cinephile, eagerly pointed out details. You know, Carpenter used only a $3,000 budget for the music, and that eerie piano theme was composed in just a few days. It's incredible how something so simple became so iconic. Juniper, sitting cross-legged on the couch, grinned, and Jamie Lee Curtis's performance. This was her first major role. It's wild to think how this film launched her career. Lara, taking a sip of her cocktail, added, and don't forget the fact that the film's success led to a slew of imitators. The whole slasher genre was practically defined by this movie. As they transitioned to Halloween 2, Red continued his commentary. This sequel picks up right where the first one left off, which was pretty unusual for the time. And remember, it's the only one where we get to see more of Michael Myers' backstory. It's also the last time Carpenter was heavily involved. Juniper nodded, adding, the hospital setting was a clever choice. It adds a claustrophobic feel that ramps up the tension. When Halloween 3 Season of the Witch began, Reg couldn't help but dive into its controversial reception. This one's a total departure from the Michael Myers storyline. It's more of an anthology approach, which a lot of fans didn't like. It's a shame though, because the idea of a Halloween-themed horror was pretty innovative. Lara, amused, teased Reg, you know, if it wasn't called Halloween, you'd probably love it. Red chuckled, true, but since it is, I'm still not a fan. But hey, it's got that eerie silver shamrock jingle, so there's that. As the credits rolled on the third film, Lara's guilt about leaving Dick alone started to weigh heavily on her. She glanced at the clock and sighed, I should go help Dick, I'm sorry guys. Thanks for the hospitality, Julie, she said, standing up and hugging her friends. Be careful, Juniper advised, a note of concern in her voice. It's almost midnight.
Allows footsteps ring as she approached the mansion. path was dimly lit by old-fashioned lampposts that cast long, wavering shadows. As she walked, her breath formed small clouds in the crisp air, and her mind raced with the day's chaos and the shadows that seemed to haunt her peripheral vision. The mansion loomed, barely discernible against the inky sky. Every now and then, Alara would catch a movement out of the corner of her eye. But when she turned, the shadows remained unoccupied. Arriving at the mansion's guardhouse, she tapped sharply on the window, startling the guard who had been dozing off. He grumbled as he let her in. As Alara passed through the gate, she noticed a chill that seemed to seep from the mansion itself. The guard, muttering into his radio, announced her arrival, giving Dick ample time to prepare. The air seemed to thicken with anticipation, and the once faint hum of distant sirens became more pronounced, their wailing interspersed with unsettling shrieks that cut through the night. Alara trudged up the steps to the entrance, her mind filled with unease. Just as she reached the door, she saw a shadowy figure darting out of one of the windows above. The figure, fleeting and almost feminine in shape, seemed to scramble down before disappearing into the night. Alara's heart skipped a beat, and she tried to shake off the sight, convincing herself it was just her imagination, fueled by the day's hysteria. As she reached the door, it swung open with a creep. Dick stood there, his face flushed and perspiring, as if he'd been rushing to get things done. His smile seemed a little too wide, a hint of something unspoken lurking behind his eyes. "Hey, baby," he said, his voice tinged with relief. "Sorry about blowing up earlier. I'm glad you're here." He pulled her into a hug and kissed her with a desperation that seemed out of place. Alara, her mind racing, managed to put on a small smile. Wow, you must have really worked hard getting things ready. And Riley must have laid on her perfume, because in the short drive bringing her home, you reek of it. Dix managed to mask his surprise with a triumphant smile. For someone so intelligent, Alara's observation was comical in its naivety. He pulled her into a deeper hug, the warmth of his body contrasting sharply with the cold, eerie mansion. Still, Alara couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The mansion's silence, amplified by distant screams and sirens in the night. Still, she struggled to convince herself it was merely a figment of her overactive imagination, combined with the collective hysteria gripping the town. The air inside the mansion was thick with unnatural quiet, a silence so profound it felt as though the house itself was holding its breath. Shadows danced across the walls, playing tricks on her eyes. Alara, despite her growing unease, forced herself to smile and relax, trying to ignore the creeping sensation that something was very wrong.
The air inside the mansion was thick with unnatural quiet, a silence so profound it felt as though the house itself was holding its breath. Shadows danced across the walls, playing tricks on her eyes. Alara, despite her growing unease, forced herself to smile and relax, trying to ignore the creeping sensation that something was very wrong.
At the mansion, Alara and Dick embraced. The distant sounds of chaos punctuated the eerie silence of the house. Alara struggled to shake off her mounting unease, despite Dick's reassurance. As they embraced, Dick's hands roamed with a sense of urgency. "It's nothing, we'll pass," he said, his voice a low murmur. "Let's focus on being here for each other." Alara, feeling the weight of his embrace, tried to find solace in his words. "Okay," she said quietly, though her mind high. Dick's gaze lingered, his eyes dark with intense need. "Let's make the most of this time," he whispered, gently guiding her towards the dimly lit staircase. Alara, her pulse quickening, followed him upstairs. The hallway was shrouded in shadows, the only sound their muted footsteps on the old wooden floor. Outside, Riley sprinted through the chaotic streets. The night was thick, with a palpable sense of dread, each shadow and flicker of light adding to her growing terror. She could hear distant cries and the wail of sirens, but the sound seemed to blur into a chaotic symphony of fear. As she navigated the roads, Riley caught sight of a shadowy figure materializing in the distance. The figure turned its head towards her, making her mind and heart race. She tried to dismiss it as a figment of her imagination, a trick of the light, or the paranoia fueled by the night's events. Riley reached her home, breathless and trembling. She fumbled with her keys, glancing nervously over her shoulder. The street near her building was eerily quiet, and she could hear the faint, distant echoes of the chaos. Finally, she managed to unlock the door and slip inside, locking it securely behind her. Back at the apartment, Reg, Ethan, and Julie were nearly finished with their Halloween marathon, but the night's earlier disturbances had not left their minds. They exchanged worried glances as the sounds of mayhem grew louder. "Did you hear that?" Julie asked, her voice edged with concern. The distant screams had intensified, blending with the clatter of metal and shattering glass. Reg, trying to maintain calm, nodded. "It's probably nothing, just the sounds traveling from the streets." Ethan, who had been focused on his game, looked up, his expression troubled. "It sounds like it's getting closer. Should we do something?" Julie nodded, her worry increasing. "Let's check it out, see if we can figure out what's happening." As they moved to the window, the noise outside seemed to amplify, but the view remained obscured by shadows. As the night went on, the boundary between reality and nightmare grew increasingly blurred, leaving everyone grappling with their own fears in a night that seemed to stretch on interminably.
As dawn approached, the chaos waned. The mansion's eerie silence was interrupted only by the occasional creak of the old house. Elara and Dick lay in the dim morning light, their intimacy replaced by a heavy quiet. Elara's sleep was marked by uneasy murmurs and restless tossing. Eventually, she slipped out of bed and made her way downstairs. She turned on the radio. The news broadcast filled with grim reports detailing the night's violence and destruction on Harborside Island. Authorities are still investigating the source of the disturbances. Reports of widespread mayhem and casualties are emerging. Residents are urged to stay indoors. Dick joined her in the living room and switched to the TV. The screen flickered to life with chopper footage of Harborside Island showing damaged buildings, emergency responders in action, and the chaos from above. "Hey, Laura," Dick said, attempting to offer comfort. "We'll figure this out. We're safe." Elara nodded, her gaze fixed on the television. "I just wish we knew what was really going on." At Juniper's apartment, Reg, Ethan, and Junie were stirring from their restless sleeps as Reg turned on the TV. The same chopper footage was broadcast, capturing the aftermath of the night's violence. The screen showed overhead views of Harborside Island with emergency crews working feverishly. Reg muttered, "I can't believe this is happening. It's a nightmare come to life." Julie, from the kitchen counter, poured coffee as she absorbed the news. The anchor's somber tone reflected the gravity of the situation. The authorities are urging anyone with information to come forward. Emergency services are overwhelmed, and the island remains isolated after last week's storm. Ethan, groggy from lack of sleep, looked up. "This is crazy. How could all of this happen so suddenly?" Back at Riley's house, she was trying to piece together her own experiences from the night with the phone still down and no way to communicate. She turned on her radio. The broadcast was filled with reports of chaos reinforcing her fears. The situation is dire on Harborside Island. Eyewitnesses report strange shadowy figures and unexplained phenomena. Riley, feeling the weight of her exhaustion and fear, sank into a chair, her thoughts consumed. She glanced nervously out the window, hoping for normalcy, but the news only deepened her sense of dread. As the morning wore on, the reports continued to unfold. The broadcast offered a grim reflection of the violence and mystery that still loomed over Harborside Island, leaving everyone to confront the lingering shadows of the previous night.
BMW pulled up to the Harborside Diner. Laura and Dick exited the car in a calm silence. Tom was already at the door, opening up for the day. Seeing Ilara, his face softened. Ilara, Tom greeted, hugging her. I'm glad you're safe. I figured you and your friends would come. Thanks, Tom. Ilara replied. Tom turned to giving a polite but cold nod. Morning, Dick. Morning, Dick answered in equal coldness. Ilara moved toward the kitchen, intending to help, but Tom stopped her. No, Ilara, she said kindly. I'll handle it. She nodded and stepped back. Tom had set up his TV on the counter, showing news footage of the island's condition. A reporter broadcast live just around the corner by the shore. Her normally flawless beauty was marred by a black eye, swollen lip, and a makeshift sling supporting her arm. The camera revealed the wreckage of a helicopter half submerged in the sea. This is Thomasina Atkins reporting live from Harborside. Earlier, our cruise chopper crashed on the shore. We barely escaped with our lives and equipment before the tide claimed it. Her first interview subject was an older woman, her voice trembling. The shadow was just there, watching, waiting. I locked myself in the bathroom until dawn. A young man, visibly shaken, added that my neighbor lost his mind, his eyes becoming as dark as shadows, and tried to break into my house. The camera panned back to Thomasina. Despite the insanity, there have been no reported fatalities. Seth suddenly appeared, grabbing the microphone and violently shoving Miss Atkins to the ground, exacerbating her already injured shoulder. Yet, he shouted wild-eyed, no fatalities yet. I warned you, the Shadowman, he's gonna kill us all. Officer Daniels rushed in, cuffing Zeb's hands behind his back, reading in his rights law on air and arresting him for assault. Chief Stewart, whom Daniels had been accompanying, helped Thomasina up, returning the microphone. Are you okay, Miss Atkins? He asked. Thank you, Chief, she said, nodding. Stewart addressed the camera. Due to our extreme circumstances, we're enforcing a curfew tonight. No non-essential citizens are to be out after dusk. Trick-or-treating's postponed. Violators will be dealt with. Stewart and Daniels then escorted Zeb to the station. As Thomasina resumed her report, Dick became enraged. My party, he exploded. Ilara turned to him. This is more important than a Halloween death test. His rage boiling, goddammit. You don't fucking understand, he shouted, storming out of
Ilara was comforted by Tom. Mortified by Dick's behavior, Tom finished laying out a lavish breakfast spread, expecting the others to arrive soon. The spread included creamy oatmeal with a touch of salt and apple butter, fluffy pancakes topped with fresh blueberries and maple syrup, crispy fried potatoes, bacon, sausage, corned beef hash, scrambled eggs, ham steak, carafes of coffee, hot water with tea bags and honey, jugs of orange juice, and 16-ounce glass bottles of Coca-Cola Classic. As if on cue, Riley was the first to arrive. Her usual sleek and sexy appearance was abandoned. She looked disheveled in baggy sweatpants and a t-shirt. Her hair and makeup, usually refined to perfection, were now in disarray. Upon seeing Ilara, she sobbed, running to her and giving her a huge hug. Elle, oh my God, I'm so happy you're okay. Last night was awful. I thought I was in real danger. I'm so sorry, Elle. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Ilara reassured her, "You don't have anything to be sorry for. You're here. You survived. We're together." Riley, realizing Ilara didn't know what the apology was for, composed herself. With a slight, undetected tinge of guilt, she said, "Right, that's right," and sheepishly hugged her again. Moments later, Judy, Reg, and Ethan arrived together. They looked weary and exhausted, but greeted everyone warmly, even Riley. Despite their usual disdain for her, the group exchanged friendly hellos and quickly fell into a discussion about the previous night's events. They all shared the concern that today is Halloween, and it might bring even more trouble. Ilara said, "As crazy as this sounds, I think we know who is responsible." Ethan commented, "Yeah, the devil, obviously," without a hint of irony. Judy rolled her eyes and said, "Kirito Dovda," to which Reg replied, "The Shadowman." Ilara concluded, "I know it sounds crazy, but somehow, I think we have to be the ones to stop him."
The friends huddled around the table. The hum of early morning patrons barely registering Reb's frustration broke the silence. How the hell are we supposed to stop the Shadowman?
Ethan, always one to lean on faith when the world felt like it was falling apart. Tightened his jaw, his resolve hardening. We need to pray. He clasped his hands together and lowered his head. Protect us from evil, cast out the darkness, shield us from the forces that threaten us. His voice started low, almost a murmur, but it grew with each word, urgency bleeding into his tone. Riley, who usually had an answer or a quick ready, was at a loss. Her hands twisted together, knuckles white. "Maybe we should just steal a boat and get the hell out of here," she blurted, the desperation in her voice cutting through Ethan's prayer. Ethan paused, his eyes snapping open to fix her with a look that was as much pity as it was exasperation. If the waters were safe, they would have activated the replacement ferries by now, he said, each word heavy with the gravity of their situation. The storm tore up the seabed so bad it's dangerous to operate even small boats. They're hoping to get the ferries running by tomorrow, but that's wishful thinking at best. Reg was already thinking ahead, searching for a plan that didn't end with them at the bottom of the bay. Maybe there's something at the library. Ilara and Julie exchanged a glance, the same thought flickering between them like a shared secret. The university library, Ilara said, her voice tinged with hope. It's rich in history, folklore, and legends, especially about this town. That's why we came here in the first place. Junie nodded, the fire of determination flaring up in her eyes. Exactly. If there's anything that can help us, it'll be there. Reg nodded, his agreement swift and certain. We need to go there for research, it's our best shot. Riley hesitated, fear creeping into her features. "I'm not sure about this. Maybe we should just stay put." She trailed off, glancing around the table, realizing she didn't want to be left alone. "But I don't want to be alone," she finished, her voice small. Finally, she nodded, "I'll go." Ethan was the last to weigh in, his faith warring with the practicalities of the situation. "Do they have a religious studies section?" he asked, And when Alara nodded, he let out a heavy sigh. Alright, I'm in. With a final glance around the table, they said their goodbyes to Tom, who was starting to get his first weary customers of the day. The diner filling with the slow murmur of exhausted voices and clinking cups. Then they headed out, the weight of what lay ahead pressing down on them like a shroud. As they made their way up the road, the sky, despite the forecast, began to darken. The clouds rolled in, thick and heavy, swallowing the light. And with the darkened sky came shadows slithering out from the corners of their vision, growing bolder with every step they took.
The air was heavy. The group made their way toward the college, each step filled with a dread that clung to them as thickly as the shadows did creep. The shadows seemed to ripple and writhe before condensing into the figure of a man dressed in early 17th century attire. At first it was just a trick of light, until it wasn't. He emerged as though he'd always been there. Riley's terror caused a sob to escape her lips, and she clung to Alara. Each sighting of the man was like a fresh wound in her already frayed nerves. It was Alara's resolve that kept her and the group together, pushing them ever onward. Ethan's face was pale with barely concealed fear, and he did what came naturally to him. He prayed, "Shield us from the forces of darkness." He murmured, his voice steady though his heart filled with dread, "Guide us through this terror." The pulsed with malevolently, as if Ethan's prayers fueled their ire. They slithered across the ground like something that hungered. The Shadowman reappeared, his form solidifying with each step, a manifestation of true darkness. He manifested a bludgeon out of the shadows and brought it crashing down upon the window of a nearby car. The glass shattered into a glittering shower of shards, a cacophony that mingled with the group's mounting fear. He moved slowly, picking up the physical shadow of a discarded lighter. The shadow sparked the flame to life, and with a swift motion, he ignited a wooden bench, flames roaring to life with a cruel intensity. The most horrifying moment came when he turned to a young boy, older than 6, walking with his mother. With a cruel kick, the boy's leg snapped, the bone breaking into a mangled compound fracture, a scream, a piercing wail that would haunt all who heard for the rest of their days. The mother's, her face twisted in terror, scooped him up and fled. Alara and Junie led on, their duel of determination. Keeping the group together, Riley stumbled along, barely able to see through her tears. Ethan's prayers had become a constant murmur, and Reggie just trudged along as if in a trance. Somehow, they made it to their destination. The school stone walls, usually a symbol of higher learning, now seemed like a fortress against evil. As they bounded up the steps, the shadows did not seem to follow them inside, but they could feel them lurking, as if waiting for a chance to strike. As they neared the library, Shadowman emerged from a dim corner, and with chilling ease tapped his fingertip to the head of a security guard before disappearing. The guard's eyes turned black, and silently, he grabbed his nightstick. With a menacing resolve, he advanced on the group. Help.